Welcome back, pilots, and welcome back to Titanfall 2. Thank you for coming to my YouTube channel. Today I got an interesting video. I'm going to be comparing the R-101 Carbine to the R-201 Carbine. I searched the internet for this. I couldn't find a video, so I think it'd be nice if there was like a very nice testing of these weapons. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into a private match on Exoplanet, and I'm going to shoot both the R-101 and the R-201 at a wall, and then I'm going to look at the spray pattern. That's simple. We're going to do 3 trials per test, and we're going to look at the HCOG, the HCOG Ranger, the iron sights for both, do some other testing like the hip fire spread, and the spread for 2-round bursts. Personally, I've always thought that this notion that the R-101 is just better than the R-201 has been a little bit ridiculous. I thought it was just a figment of our imaginations. You know, maybe when that Colony Reborn DLC was added to the game, people were looking for a reason to use the R-101 because they wanted a new weapon to be added to the game. They wanted something special about it. But I thought that was just in people's heads, so I tested it, and it looks like I was wrong, unfortunately. But not really. The results were sort of consistent and inconsistent. They were inconsistent because sometimes the spray patterns looked virtually identical, and other times they looked very, very different. But they were also sort of consistent because one gun was never actually outperformed by the other. The R-101, as it turns out, will perform identically or better than the R-201, depending on some weird RNG code that Respawn has implemented into the R-201's recoil pattern. Looking at the R-101 and the R-201, with both of them using their default iron sights, the R-201 actually compared quite nicely to the R-101. The first trial, you could definitely tell that the R-101 spray pattern was a little bit tighter. The recoil settled a little bit faster after those first couple of bullets. But trials 2 and 3 were virtually indistinguishable. They seemed very, very similar. Moving on to the HCOG sight, things got a little bit uglier for the R-201. The R-101 outperformed it drastically in the first 2 tests, but it did do pretty well in the third trial. So, I know that's a little disappointing. A lot of people like the aesthetic of the HCOG sight. It's probably my favorite sight in the game. But the R-201, apparently it's not optimal, so don't use it. Yeah, the sight is very open, the sight is very open, and the zoom feels very good. So, if you like your Underground Elite camo on your R-201, you like the aesthetic of the HCOG sight, then by all means use it, but here are the facts, and the facts are that the R-201 kicks like hell with the HCOG sight. With the HCOG Ranger, I forgot to record a third trial, but I did get 2 trials. On the first one, they felt pretty close. The R-201 felt like it just fell a little bit short of the R-101, just a little bit more recoil, but the second trial was very revealing. The R-101 demolished it. I think the radius of the spread was like half as large, so HCOG Ranger does not look like it is optimal for the R-201 Carbine. Moving on to the threat sights. So the R-201 with the threat scope versus the R-101 with its iron sights. The R-201 with the threat scope, actually the first 2 trials looked very competitive with the R-101. The third trial though, this all changed. The R-101 blew it out of the water, and the R-201 experienced that deadly RNG recoil that I talked about earlier. It just kicked and kicked more than even the flat line. So, the threat scope is not my favorite anyway, but it looks like if you're running an R-201, the threat scope might actually be a decent option for recoil control. Next, I tested the hip fire for both of these weapons. I think this is really important. The R-101 and R-201 carbines are actually good hipfire weapons, but they're unique because most weapons in the game either feel objectively better from the hip, like the alternator or the Volt, or they feel objectively better aimed down sights, like the G2 or the Spitfire, or the Hemlock. The R-101 and R-201 are different in the sense that there's a time and place for both. So if you like to play aggressively and airborne and on the walls with your R-201 or R-101 carbine, then just know that the hipfire spread seemed identical. I did not notice any difference. So you should feel equally comfortable, equally safe with both these weapons while airborne and hip firing. Next, I went ahead and compared the R-101 to the R-101. I compared them sight by sight, so I used the R-101 with the iron sight and compared it to the threat scope first. And what I noticed was they were identical. The threat scope performed just as well as the iron sight. I also prefer the aesthetic of the threat scope better, but I'd rather have that extra mod slot personally with the R-101 in the iron sight. Next was the HCOG Ranger, which performed pretty poorly, actually. I would not recommend running the Ranger on the R-101, not just because you should be generally more aggressive, challenging SMG players with this weapon, but the recoil was objectively the worst with this sight. But, if you like to play more passive and you like the aesthetic of it, of course, use it, but I would not personally recommend it. The HCOG Traditional was a little bit better than the HCOG Ranger, but it did still fall short of the threat scope and the iron sights. So this is aesthetically my favorite sight. It's the most open, the perfect amount of zoom, but I think I will try and get used to the iron sights now because they appear to have just objectively less recoil. The last thing that I did was I tested the guns in 2-round bursts. This is my preferred firing method at longer ranges. I find that it really helps control the recoil. So I took the R-101 with its iron sights and the R-201 with a threat sight. I fired 2-round bursts, and I'm sure to everybody's surprise, the R-101 was better, by quite a lot actually. The spread was almost zero. It looked like as if you had fired a G2 at a wall actually. The R-201 was also pretty good, but it was definitely worse than the R-101. So it's worth it to fire in 2-round bursts for both weapons, but you should know that burst fire and tap fire is more effective with the R-101 compared to the R-201. With all that being said, I want to thank everybody for watching and for visiting my YouTube channel. Don't forget to drop a like if you liked the video, drop a dislike if you hated it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel because I'm trying to be consistent this summer with my uploads. So thank you very much and take care.